picture this. It is London, 1888. The streets are alive with the smell of coal smoke and horse carriages. Gas lamps flicker in the fog. And somewhere in the heart of the city, inside a grand ballroom decorated with thousands of white flowers, a young girl in a white silk gown stands very, very still. She is 17 years old. Her name is Eleanor. Her hair has been pinned up for the very first time. Her hands are shaking inside her long white gloves. She has spent the last 3 months practicing how to walk, how to curtsy, how to smile at the right moment. And tonight, the most important night of her life, a night she has been told she should feel grateful for. She feels something she was never supposed to admit. She feels terrified. Now, when most of us hear the word debutante, we picture something beautiful. We think of Bridgerton. We think of sparkling dresses, romantic dances, and young women living their best lives in candlelit ballrooms. We think of freedom, elegance, and fairy tale romance. But here is the truth that history has kept very quiet. For the young women of Victorian London in 1888, the debutante season was not a fairy tale. It was a job, a very strict, very exhausting, and often frightening job, and they were never even asked if they wanted it. Today, we are going to go back to 1888. We are going to see what life was really like for these girls. And by the end of this story, you will never look at a ball gown the same way again. To understand Eleanor's story, you first need to understand the world she was born into. Victorian England in 1888 was one of the most powerful empires the world had ever seen. Queen Victoria sat on the throne. The British Empire stretched across a quarter of the entire globe. London was its proud, beating heart, a city of great wealth, great invention, and also great rules. And the most important rule of all, if you were a girl from a wealthy family, was this: your entire purpose in life was to marry well. That sounds harsh, but it was simply the reality. Upper-class women in 1888 could not go to most universities. They could not vote. They could not work in a respectable profession. They could not own property independently. Their future, their financial security, their social standing, their very identity depended entirely on the man they married. And so, families did what families do. They created a system, a structured, carefully organized, deeply serious system designed to get their daughters married to the right kind of man. They called it the season. The season was essentially a 6-month stretch, running from spring into summer, during which the most eligible young women in England were formally introduced to the most eligible young men. There were balls and dinners, horse races and garden parties, afternoon teas and opera nights. It all sounds wonderful, and from the outside, it truly did look beautiful. But let us go back to Eleanor. Because Eleanor's experience of the season was nothing like the pretty picture, Eleanor had been preparing for her debut since she was 15. 2 full years. That was how long the process of preparing a girl for her single most important public appearance had taken. And those 2 years were not relaxed or joyful. They were filled with lessons. Endless lessons. She had learned how to walk with a book balanced on her head, so her posture would be perfect. She had learned which fork to use at a 12-course dinner. She had learned how to make small talk with strangers without ever saying anything too clever or too bold. She had learned how to curtsy, not just once, but dozens of times, until her knees ached. Because when she was finally presented before Queen Victoria herself, a clumsy curtsy was not just embarrassing. It was a disaster. She had been measured for her court gown. White silk. Of course, it was always white. White symbolized purity. The dress had a long train, a piece of fabric that would trail behind her as she walked, and she had to learn to pick it up gracefully, hold it over her arm, and then let it fall behind her at exactly the right moment. She had also been fitted with 3 white ostrich feathers to be pinned into her hair, along with a floor-length veil. Now here is something that most people do not realize. When Eleanor and the other debutantes arrived at the palace on presentation day, they did not simply walk straight in. They waited. For hours. The girls and their mothers and sponsors would arrive in horse-drawn carriages in the early afternoon and sit, in full court dress, in those enormous gowns, wearing their feathers and veils, in a line of carriages stretching for streets. They brought books. They brought knitting. They passed biscuits to each other through the carriage windows to stay awake. By the time Eleanor stepped inside the palace, her feet were sore, her hair was slightly wilted, and she was desperately hoping she would not need to use the bathroom, because the facilities, if you could call them that, consisted of a chamber pot hidden behind a curtain. This was the glamorous life of a Victorian debutante. When Eleanor finally stood before the Queen, she had only a few seconds. She walked forward. She curtsied, low and slow and careful, just as she had practiced 100 times. She did not make eye contact for too long. She did not smile too widely. She did not speak unless she was spoken to. Queen Victoria gave a small nod, and then Eleanor stepped back, turned smoothly, without showing her back to the monarch, and walked out. That was it. A few seconds. 2 years of preparation for a few seconds. But those few seconds were not the point. The point was what came after. Because now that Eleanor had been officially presented at court, she was a debutante. She was on the market, and the season could begin. From that night onwards, Eleanor's calendar was full. Every single night. Balls, dinners, theater trips, garden parties, picnics in Hyde Park, afternoons at Royal Ascot. Every event was carefully chosen, every invitation carefully considered. Who would be there? Were there eligible bachelors? Were their families good families? Did they have money? Did they have land? Eleanor was never alone. She was always chaperoned. Her mother, or an older relative, or a trusted family friend, was always nearby, always watching. This was not because her family did not trust her. It was because the rules were absolute. An unchaperoned girl was a ruined girl. One wrong step, one private conversation with a young man that lasted too long, one dance that was repeated more than twice with the same partner, could destroy her reputation entirely. And a ruined reputation meant no good marriage, and no good marriage meant no future. The pressure was enormous, and Eleanor felt every pound of it. Now let us pause here, because this is the part of the story that history books often skip. Not every debutante was miserable. Some girls genuinely loved the season. They loved the dancing and the dresses and the excitement of it all. They made friends. They fell in love. They married men who turned out to be kind and good. For them, the system worked. But for many others, perhaps most others, the experience was much more complicated. Think about what these girls were actually being asked to do. They were 17 or 18 years old. They had grown up in the schoolroom, under the care of governesses, with very little knowledge of the real world. And then suddenly, overnight, they were expected to perform. To be witty, but not too witty. To be beautiful, but not too confident about it. To be warm, but not too friendly. To attract a husband without appearing to try. It was an exhausting act. Every conversation was a performance. Every smile was calculated. Every dance was strategic. And here is the cruelest part of all. Even if a girl did everything right, there was no guarantee it would work. Some debutantes went through the entire season without receiving a single proposal. Their families would sigh and whisper and begin preparing for a second season. The pressure doubled. The clock was ticking, because a girl who did not marry young was a girl who was a burden on her family. And a girl who reached her mid-20s without marrying was, in the language of the time, dangerously close to becoming a spinster. So what choices did these girls really have? Almost none. They could accept a proposal from a man they barely knew, or they could face a lifetime of social shame and financial dependence. That was the real choice behind the white gowns and the sparkling chandeliers. Eleanor understood this. On the nights when she lay awake in her bedroom, listening to the city outside, she understood it very clearly. It happened on a Tuesday evening 6 weeks into the season. There was a ball at a grand house in Mayfair. The rooms were packed, the music was beautiful, and a young man named Thomas, the second son of a good family, decent prospects, pleasant enough face, asked Eleanor to dance. They danced once, then twice. Her mother watched from across the room with sharp, hopeful eyes. Thomas was kind. He asked her what she liked to read. He laughed at something she said. When the music stopped, he held her hand just a moment longer than necessary and said with a gentle smile that he hoped very much they would meet again. Eleanor smiled back. She said the right thing. She performed her part perfectly. And then she went to the powder room and stood alone in front of a small mirror, and she looked at herself. At the feathers in her hair, the pearl necklace at her throat, the perfectly arranged curls, and she thought, I do not even know what I want. I have never been asked. That moment did not change her life. She did not run away. She did not refuse the system, because in 1888, there was nowhere to run to. But something shifted inside her, a small, quiet knowing that beneath all the preparation, beneath all the performance, she was still a person. A real person with real thoughts and real feelings, and that, even if no one else could see it, mattered. So what happened to Eleanor? She married Thomas 3 months after that Tuesday ball. The wedding was modest and tasteful. Her mother was proud. Her dress was beautiful. People said she made a very good match. Was she happy? Mostly. Thomas turned out to be a decent man. Life was comfortable. She had children, a large house, a full calendar of social obligations. It was a life many people would have envied. But Eleanor sometimes thought about that moment in front of the mirror. And she hoped, quietly and privately, that the world would one day be different for girls who came after her. And it was. Slowly, painfully, slowly, but it was. The debutante season continued for decades after Eleanor's time. But by the mid-20th century, the world was changing. Women were entering universities, joining the workforce, demanding the right to vote. The old system began to feel ridiculous. In 1958, Queen Elizabeth II ended the formal presentation of debutantes at court. Just like that, an institution that had shaped the lives of thousands of young women for nearly 2 centuries was over. But here is what we should carry with us from Eleanor's story. The girls who walked those ballrooms, who practiced their curtsies for months, who smiled through the exhaustion and the pressure and the fear, they were not weak. They were not simply decorations in pretty dresses. They were young women navigating an incredibly difficult system with grace and intelligence and resilience. They did not choose that world, but they survived it, and some of them, in their own quiet ways, found room inside it to be fully, privately, honestly themselves. The next time you see a photograph of a Victorian debutante, standing straight and still in her white gown, her expression carefully composed, look a little closer. Behind those eyes, there is a whole world. And now you know what that world really looked like.